Hello and welcome to Sedate the Stress, a podcast for healthcare leaders by healthcare leaders. I am Adrianna Muñoz, your host. Whether you're a new healthcare leader or an international executive, we will walk you through different aspects of healthcare so you leave with actionable takeaways. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow along. And today we are lucky to have on the wonderful, the fantastic Megan Dohn. Megan was inspired to become a nurse by her grandfather and a desire to be in a profession where she could help others. After working for 8 years as an emergency department nurse, she was inspired to go into leadership after noticing her and her colleagues repeatedly encountered the same seemingly solvable barriers to providing quality patient care and staff satisfaction. In her current role, she strives to empower her staff toward their own career growth and to create an environment free of barriers and friction. On a personal note, Megan and I worked shoulder to shoulder throughout the COVID pandemic. She was a charge nurse and she was absolutely wonderful to work with. The ER that we worked in was crazy busy. It's a level 1 trauma center, and we were on the front lines of COVID. And I have nothing but fantastic things to say to her, and I'm just so excited to feature her story. We have the wonderful Megan Dohn on. Megan, I just introduced you. Would you mind sharing with everybody listening and watching along a little bit of what you do and who you are?
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. Thanks for having me. So I'm Megan Dohn. I am a nurse by trade. I will say probably would always describe myself as an ER nurse. Been a nurse since 2012, but in my current role, I am the practice manager of a family medicine clinic. So I manage the medical assistants and the nurses and also the front desk staff, and then just help run all the operations for a family medicine clinic.
Once an ER nurse, always an ER nurse. That's something that
Yes.
resonates with me. What would you say led you to nursing?
When I was little, I always said, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, just like my grandpa. He always really inspired me to work in medicine, just his stories about coming out of World War II and going straight to medical school and becoming a neurosurgeon in times before they even had CTs and definitely didn't have MRIs. And so I always knew I wanted to work in medicine. But then when I came down to looking at medical school and what doctors actually did, I became more interested in becoming a nurse because I was really interested in, I want to help people. I want to help take care of patients. I want to help them be healthier. And I always felt like a doctor is sort of addressing a disease they're taking less care of not to say what they do is not incredibly important and valuable, but they're really taking care of like a disease, whereas a nurse really takes care of a whole person. And so that was always really interesting to me. And then the ER just was always my calling, my passion. I never worked as another bedside nurse. I went right from nursing school to the emergency department. I love that like adrenaline and something new every day. So that just, I don't know, something about the ER just always called to me. Then, I did that for 8 years. I was a charge nurse in a really busy emergency department during COVID, felt burnt out, and also just had a desire to, how can I make a bigger imprint on the healthcare system? And part of that was I kept seeing in the ER people coming who didn't have access to primary care or didn't know, they just were undereducated about the healthcare system, like when they should be going to the ER, when they should be utilizing primary care. And so that's when I got interested in primary care and I moved to family medicine. Just felt like I could make a bigger impact, have a more longitudinal impact on a group of patients rather than just you touch a patient once and then you may never see them again. So yeah, that's my journey into nursing.
It's fun to hear that you grew up with the idea in your head. You're like, I'm gonna end up in healthcare, I'm gonna end up in medicine. And I think it's really cool to hear you make that distinction between nurses and physicians, where both both professions are incredibly important, and hospitals would not be able to function without either. And it just looks different. And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's so cool that you share that, because when I it got me thinking. I'm like, oh, like, how did I get into nursing? And I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist. I was touring pharmacy colleges and
Interesting.
I was like, I love organic chemistry. And I was straight up lying to myself.
Oh my
I did.
God.
I took self-taught organic chemistry in high school and I was like, I'm going to be a pharmacist. And I started shadowing pharmacists and visiting pharmacy colleges. And I was like, oh, I actually hate this. I love people.
Yeah.
And when I got to meet a nurse before I went through the formal application process my junior and senior year of high school, I was like, wow, I actually want to be with people. And it was a great way to blend that human component that I'm hearing you talk about, like be at the bedside with the patient, with that technical expertise and that science and the math and the anatomy and the pharmacology. It was a great way to balance everything out. And then I don't know about you, but the ER was perfect for me. I
Yes.
just get bored so quickly. I also love that adrenaline rush.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Just I can't do the same thing every day. I would struggle to take, be in a unit where they're like taking care of the same patient for weeks on end.
Yes.
I love the just like quick in and out. Like I have to make a decision on the fly. Like just, we were kind of chatting earlier before we started. Like you just are really good at figuring things out. And that's how my brain works. It's just like, here's a little problem. I'm going to just make a quick decision to solve it. And so that
Yeah.
definitely led me to, I think, succeed in the emergency department. And I also like that piece you said resonates with me about just like, I really like people and I want to talk to people and I want to hear their stories and I want to interact with them more than just a brief, like, how you doing? Let me look at your labs and then go back to a
Hmm.
computer.
And in the ER, there's no better place. I mean, you're going to meet hundreds of people a day. If it's a really busy ER, at least 20 or 30, where we were both working throughout COVID. And one thing that I would love to hear from you, because you were in that charge nurse role throughout COVID, and one thing that I can speak for myself, I found particularly challenging about that is because there were no resources that were static. Everything was always changing. And it wasn't just the fear around this new disease, it was what's staffing going to look like today? Where, like, and just thinking about the resources, not just for us, but then for our patients, because the workflows were changing
Mm-hmm.
all the time. So, and that's something that I think is a constant truth in nurse leadership. Like, there's no such thing as static resources. So, how do you approach those conversations when change is the only constant when you're leading in healthcare?
I think that was one of the most difficult things about COVID was every day I would come to work and, a charge nurse is in a leadership role, but you're not the decision maker. You're kind of just like filtering information to the rest of the staff that you receive from your managers. And that every day I would come to work and it was like, oh, today actually here's a new workflow. Here's today a new group of patients that we're going to be taking care of, or here now no visitors are allowed, or now today some visitors are allowed. And there was also that just managing that fear, for my own fear, the fear of staff members, fear of patients. And so I just really felt like I wanted to communicate with the staff that I was leading that day, like really clearly. And I put a lot of effort into trying to get answers from our leadership, like what is happening? Why is this changing? Why are we doing this now? So that I could help everybody understand. And I really made a point the whole time I was a charge nurse, I made a point to check in with staff. I used to say I would do my social rounds when I came in. So I just wanted to come in, say hi to everybody. Hey, how's your new puppy? How's your kid? Unrelated to work. I wanted to check in with everybody, be like, hey, I'm here. Let's chit chat. So that way I already had this ground level, just like, hey, you can come to me for anything because I know about your new puppy and I know about your kids and I know
Hmm.
about this other thing you're doing, so that you can come to me when you're like, you have that baseline comfort to come to me and say, I don't like that we don't have masks anymore. Like, I don't like that. I don't feel comfortable with that. And I wanted people to be able to come to me with those fears. And then I could say, let me go get an answer for you and let me figure out what's happening and why we're doing this. But it was hard, very hard, because I felt like I think everybody in the whole country felt like we just had no information and we didn't know what was going on. But I think just being somebody I always strive, even in my current role, I want to be somebody that you feel comfortable coming to. And if that has to do with because I know about your personal life or because we make funny jokes together, whatever it is that we can connect on that makes you feel then comfortable when coming to me when you have a problem.
I love that. And what I'm hearing is you approach those things with intentionality, where you're like, all right, I could just walk up to people and be like, all right, y'all, here's a new workflow. Actually, we ran out of this piece of equipment and now we're doing this. And this is now within your scope of practice and let's figure it out. Having that personal relationship just makes it a little bit more easy to navigate that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yeah, it's I feel more comfortable going to my managers or my leaders if I know something about them or if they feel approachable to me. I will be much more likely to say like, hey, I have this issue and I would like want to discuss it with you rather than those. I've definitely had leaders before that felt really unapproachable that I knew nothing about them and I had never connected with them on a personal level, and so it's intimidating to then say, hey, I have this need or I have this question and I need you to help me resolve it. And I don't want my staff or the people that I lead to feel that way. So I intentionally make a point to be like really approachable and really know them on a personal level.
I love to piggyback off that point and ask, what advice do you have for people who are having a hard time connecting with their bosses?
Oh, that's a great question. Because I know I've learned sort of in my leadership role that sometimes being a boss that's like, hey, I want to know everything about you is also really intimidating to people. So I think just being persistent and having the confidence to say like, hey, I want to hear more about you, or I want to know something about you that's not work related, which I know not everybody, that's a hard thing to do to say to your
Mhm.
boss, like, hey, do you have kids? Or, oh, where do you vacation? I know that's a hard thing for some people to do, especially when you're like, my boss is really intimidating. So I think just voicing that to your leader, if you've felt like you could do that, like voicing that I really want to know you a little bit more on a personal level, and it helps me reach out to you when I have a need, or it helps me understand where you're coming from if I know just
Mhm.
a little bit about you. I don't know, that getting to that point where you feel comfortable saying that is hard. And I recognize that. I'm actually like sort of a shy person, which I don't necessarily present that way, but I sort of am. And so it's taken me a long time to figure out like I just gotta ask the questions and just put myself out there.
I appreciate you calling that out because I think that there are a lot of people who view leadership roles as like, like I have to be an extrovert. I have to be this person. But I found that some of my favorite bosses have been highly introverted and just they pick
Mm,
up on everything. And I appreciate you answering that question as well, because I know it's tough and I just love to hear people's perspectives on it. And it kind of starts with if the leader is not intentionally creating a space of psychological safety, which starts with we're all there, but what are we doing to build those, if not personal relationships, like personable? And I I don't know. Sometimes I'll still work with physicians and I find my inner dialogue is like, oh, Adriana, like they're intimidating. And then I have to override that part of my brain and be like, stop, they're human. And so I'll be like, how's your summer been? And then normally they're like, oh my God, I went on this vacation. Oh, that's so cool. And then before you know it, they are just so chatty and they're so excited. I just love that you encourage people to ask those questions, but then also my little piece of advice for people could be like, you don't have to be super personal to be personable. There's a difference.
hmm
So if you are finding intimidation with a boss, maybe start figuring out what triggers you about them to understand. If you are enjoying this episode of Sedate the Stress, be sure to subscribe. If you're looking for additional resources, head over to ogdenpeak.com/ebook, where you can get your free copy of How to Manage People. Because we know over here at Ogden Peak that leadership in healthcare can be hard, but you're not in it alone. Resources are available. Is it the way they talk to you? Is the way they present? Do you just not have enough one-on-one time with them? And then building the relationship intentionally from there. Just, I don't know. I've not to be a brown noser, but I like dropped off cookies to a boss one day and I was like, I
hmm
hope you don't have a
hmm
nut allergy because here's some cookies. I don't know but that's also what I'm comfortable with. So definitely stick to your comfort level.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I don't know if I would be comfortable doing that, but
It worked for
and
me.
like I think that when I think about bosses that have been like intimidating to me, I think of sort of two different people. One is the person who's a little standoffish, maybe doesn't talk a lot, doesn't offer a lot of personal-ish information. Those people I find really intimidating because I'm like, oh my God, what are they thinking about me? It must be my brain. I'm a catastrophizer, so my brain immediately goes to, well, they obviously hate me because they haven't asked me
Mm.
how my summer is going, which is not the case. I know that to be a fact. That is not the case. And then the other leaders that I've had that I find sometimes intimidating are ones who are really extroverted and they lead a meeting and they're talking a lot and have a lot to say. And you're like, I can't get a word in otherwise. And I think to your point that some of your best leaders have been maybe more introverted is,
Mm-hmm.
and I think same, I think it's because they listen more than they talk, or they, appear to be really thoughtful in what they say. And if they're saying something that it's important, you should listen to it because they maybe aren't always out there really outgoing and really presenting a lot of information. And so when they do, you're like, oh, that's the thing I really got to pay attention to. And so I think those are two extremes of leaders I've had before that I found intimidating. And I think both you can approach in the same way. For me, anyway, is just like, let me just get to know that person a little bit more, have a little bit more of a personal relationship. And it helps me, and it shuts down that part of my brain that is, well, clearly this person is so much smarter than me and so much, hates me, or they don't respect me. Once I get to know them a little better, I'm like, none of those things are true. That was just like that part of my brain that, I don't know, that negative self-talk, or that's just, my brain is fooling me.
Mine likes to do that too, and I don't know if that's an Adriana thing or a nursing thing. I do the same thing with people too, and so it's learning how to recognize when I start catastrophizing things and being like, stop,
Hmm.
stop, stop. You're doing it to yourself. I know that's a great call out, and I'd love to pivot because I think we're on the topic of
Hmm.
engaging with people now in leadership roles, and I'll share a quick background story because I want to prompt this question a little bit. Where when I started stepping into formal management roles from influential leadership roles, I was essentially a float charge nurse in primary care clinics across the state. I was so surprised about the conflicts that people brought to me. I felt like I needed to mediate things and it was challenging. So how did your perspective change once you stepped into that formal management role on managing and navigating conflict at work?
I also was surprised by that because I'm a person that it would have to be really bad for me to approach a leader with a conflict. My most natural instinct is a little bit conflict averse. And so it's just something I work on all the time. But when I was a bedside nurse, just if I had conflict with someone, I was just like, I'll just try to avoid them, or I'll just do their work for them. And I really had to learn like how to approach conflict. So I was really surprised when I stepped into a more formal leadership role that people would come to me as like, well, so and so put their lunch in my spot, like they, just really what I felt like were really minor conflicts. And I was like,
Hmm.
I cannot believe you're coming to me with this. And I was surprised. Maybe because I'm conflict adverse, I don't tend to have conflicts with people at work. I'm just like, whatever. I just sort of let things roll off me. So I was surprised by the amount of conflict that people were having at work. And I would say my first instinct was like, okay, I'll talk to each one of you separately. Let's see if we can resolve this by me having separate meetings with these people. And that's not helpful at all because now I've just heard two sides of the same story. Probably the truth is somewhere in the middle, and nobody's had a chance to have a conversation with each other. So I sort of over the years have moved towards if two people or one person comes to me with a conflict they've had with each other, I really encourage them to tell me, well, what have you done? How have you addressed this with this person before you've come to me? And Of course, there's some things that, if they don't feel psychologically safe, but the vast majority of the time they say, yeah, I actually would feel comfortable talking to her about it. And sometimes I'll, give them tips like, well, this is something I've noticed about that person, that maybe they communicate in a certain way. So maybe when you talk to them, try phrasing it like this. So go have that conversation with that person and then let me know. Sometimes I would say 80% of the time it stops there. The two of them have a conversation and they hear each other and the conflict resolves. If they either don't feel comfortable having that conversation with the other person or it just doesn't go well, then that usually becomes like, let's have a conversation, all three of us together. Me as like just a mediator. And I try to do a lot of what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, and Z. And what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, and Z. Is that what you are saying? Or sometimes it's just a matter of, let me diffuse the language that somebody's using. Let me distill it down to like what I'm actually hearing in a more calm, less inflammatory verbiage is this. And then usually some resolution comes from that. But I really like people to try to address it with each other first. As a leader, you're not their babysitter, you're not their mom. You don't have to say like, she gets to play with the toy for 10 minutes and then you get the toy for the next 10 minutes. We're all adults, we're in a professional setting, and how can we work together to resolve this? And I always lead with, I don't care if you like each other. You don't have to like each other, but you do have to work professionally with each other. And how can we come to an agreement of how we're going to work professionally with each other? It's a skill I'm working on because, like I said, I'm also conflict averse, so it's not my most natural thing to do to be in the middle of somebody else's conflict. But it is a huge part of leadership, I've come to discover.
I'll share too. I used to be so conflict averse, and I still have this inner voice in my head when situations pop up, whether it's another nurse, anybody, a patient, a doctor, and I have to keep my head on straight. I'm like, oh, those are emotions. That's not real. You got this. And so I have to kind of talk myself off the ledge. And that was a big learning I had when I stepped into formal management too, where people were in and out of my office all the time and so much interpersonal personality conflict. And I it's hard because to your point, it's if I knew how to set the boundaries, I feel like I would have saved myself a lot of time and I would have been more productive. But I know that frontline managers spend so much time mediating conflict. And I'm just hearing you say, I took a mediator approach, and you're like, I'm not in the middle of it because you're right. We can't solve it for people. Everyone's an adult. And I think empowering people to solve their problems. And I forgot. I had a situation before where I had people that were in and out of my office, and I was like, I remember I was so sick of it, and I took a breath, and I was like, I'm hearing that you are just this really smart person. So what advice would you give yourself? And they're like, oh, a flip switch. You have your grad degree. What can I do to facilitate this conversation? Or how can you do this? So it's hard to do though, because as a nurse, I wanted to solve that for them. But I can't. I can't solve things for
Yeah,
people.
yes. I'm actually really excited in my current role. I just started with a new company and I'm managing a clinic that just opened. So we opened in July, first part of July. So I'm hiring all new staff and, there's not a culture yet. And so I am excited to be able to build that culture of, you don't come to me for all of your problems. Like, we all talk to each other first. And I am excited to set that expectation up front with, right now we just have 3 staff members, more training, more, onboarding, but to set that expectation up front and not have to, all my other leadership roles, I've walked into a well-established, unit, a clinic, and there's a culture already there. And sometimes that culture was like, well, we go to our boss, there's a problem. So I'm really excited to hopefully build a culture where it's like, we talk to each other and we figure this out. And we don't have to I don't have to problem solve other people's problems because they know that the expectation is that they've problem solved with each other. So we'll see how that goes, but it's something I'm excited about.
That's a huge opportunity. And to your point, I feel like that doesn't really happen a lot in healthcare. Every department I've managed, has been very well established. And it took me, I think, a good 5 to 8 months to learn the cultural norms and the beliefs that people were bringing. And I was like, oh, here are the beliefs, here are the biases, here's the little things that happen. So that's really exciting. You have this opportunity, but then also the intentionality. I recognize that this is a huge opportunity. And have you ever heard of
Hmm.
the 131 method?
No.
I wish I could take credit for it. And if you're listening and you're like, that's mine, let me know and I'll edit it to include you. But it's if someone brings you one problem, you ask them what are three things you've tried and what's the one best solution.
Oh, okay.
So
I
if
like that.
someone were like, Adriana moved my lunch again and now it's all smush. Oh, that sucks. What are three things that you could do about it or three things you've already tried? You'd prompt me and be like, find the one thing that works best for you. And that's the thing that you could help hold people accountable to. You're like, oh, okay, come back to me later on in the day and always leave the chip on their shoulder. If someone brings you a problem, I've make sure that they leave with the solution too. I've learned that the hard way. I've been burned so many times.
That's a great, I like that a lot because I think that would help them in their mind be like, oh, maybe I came too early. If
Mhm.
if they're saying to you, I haven't tried anything, hopefully that kind of helps them realize, trigger, like, wow, maybe next time I should try these things. And if you're consistent about doing that, that like, oh, next time I should try some things before I come to my boss. It's
Uh,
funny because I have an 8-year-old son and I do that with him. He'll be like, I can't find my shoes. And I'm like, well, where have you looked? Instead of, and so I never really thought about implementing a similar tactic in work.
and admittedly it's hard because it could be easy to, I'll figure this out, but then it piles up over time and then we also are teaching people around us that we will just absorb that stress. That's how I felt anyway, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
something I really coach to where I'm like, don't be the default problem solver. You want to do that training to start facilitating leadership and different opportunities for people under you. And people want to feel autonomous. I'd love to ask also, so stepping into nursing leadership, what words of wisdom do you have for people listening?
I think, you have to be flexible no matter where you are in healthcare. It's constantly changing. At least specifically in my career, I've always worked for academic research centers. And so it's always going to change. There's always going to be new evidence, new best practices. So you yourself have to be really flexible and you have to try and help your staff also be flexible because it's really, really hard when you're like, I come to work every day and I work really hard and I finally got this thing down. And now you're telling me I have to change how I do something. And I think people really dig in and just like, no, this is how I do it. And so fostering a culture or fostering an environment where not only is change inevitable, change is a good thing. This means we're taking better care of our patients. We're taking better care of ourselves because we have a better way of, maybe a simpler way of doing things. And so I think fostering a, a desire to change and being flexible is really important. I also think, healthcare can be a little bit bureaucratic. So there's always, kind of, in my experience, there's always many people above you. And so you just have to sort of be prepared to be hold a bunch of things from those who you lead and those who are leading you. And just some things you just have to accept. This is just how we're doing things. This is what the federal government has said we're doing. So we're doing it. And so just having that mindset, like I just accept the things that I cannot change, I think is really important in leadership in general, particularly in healthcare, because there are just things
Hmm.
that are going to come down that you just have to be okay with. What else? I think just in general, really making sure, at least for me, the reason I got into leadership is I kept seeing these barriers and these frictions when I was a bedside nurse and my coworkers, we just kept experiencing the same things over and over again. That every time you try to scan your meds, none of the barcode scanners work. And it just felt so like I just want to bash my head in because I put in tickets or whatever and nothing ever changes. And I felt as a leader, I could remove some of those barriers. I can make things more frictionless. And I think remembering that my job
Mm.
is to really help my staff take the best possible care of patients. So if I can remove a barrier for them to take better care of patients, then I want to do that. And that's really my goal. And I think that not only leads to better patient care, but like most importantly, it leads to staff satisfaction. And that's my most important thing, is that I have really satisfied staff, that they love what they're doing and they feel like they want to come to work every day because
Mm.
they enjoy and they have some meaning from the work that they're doing. And if their work is impeded by IT issues or printer problems or those just like really annoying things, those are things I can take a little bit of my day and try to resolve or come up with a better solution, so that they can just feel like they are just there to take care of patients and feel more satisfied. So that's what I try to remember, is like my job is to remove those barriers and those impediments.
Oh, I love that. And
I think that's all the wisdom I have.
that's really big. And I think that keeping our why at the forefront of the work, because sometimes it can feel very tasky. It's like, oh, another meeting. Oh, like, okay, I'm being delegated this project and it feels like it's not going anywhere. It's like, all right, let's remember why we're doing this and remembering that, okay, this is going to make the staff stay better. It's going to make it better care for patients. It's like it kind of helps look at things through a lens that's a little bit more rosy colored rather than just the day to day hemming and hawing over an issue and engaging multiple shareholders, especially for a large organization. It can be sometimes a little bit confusing and who to engage and how to get things done quickly. That's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's huge. And my leadership word of wisdom, it's remembering my compass. It's always patient care. And that guided me through the work that seemed very trivial and also those conversations that were really difficult. And so I'd also just love to open up the platform. Is there anything that we haven't talked about and you're like, it is gnawing at me? I would love to share this or maybe pose another question.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I guess, I would ask you, like I was saying, I am opening this new clinic, hiring all the staff, and I've been really interested in like, how do you build a culture and how do you build a positive culture? And because like we were talking about, I've always walked into like really well established places. And so I guess I'd ask you, and the work you've been doing, like, what are your thoughts on building a culture and building a positive, change focused culture?
Yeah. So let me think. I'll kind of contextualize this question a little bit. When I think of a workplace culture, I think of those ingrained beliefs and automatic behaviors that people have. And so the best cultures that I've seen, it's when everybody is in alignment and in agreement with their work, their compass. And I'm thinking of one team that I managed that was very small and their culture was just excellence. From top to bottom, the provider was just always engaging people, positive feedback loops, negative behaviors were discussed openly. There was a culture of psychological safety and like me stepping into it as a manager, it was very easy to support that because I was just like, you don't even need me. What can I do to
Mm-hmm.
support you? And so, if to build that culture, I think it would be just understanding people's beliefs at baseline and then also establishing behavioral norms. And so if you're like, I really want to prioritize not just a huddle, but the conversation in huddle, like how do I demonstrate that? How do I positively reward people who show up and they bring me concerns? And I never did this, but I heard of one woman where she was trying to turn around a negative culture. She wrote thank you cards when people filled out feedback forms. And she was just like
Wow.
that. And it was amazing because she was trying to
Mm-hmm.
build psychological safety. And so she said, thank you for not just filling out the feedback form, but for providing examples of how we could change it and how you could help change it. So she was very intentional about rewarding autonomy and when people feel safe speaking up. I just threw a lot at you. I think to make that very concise and not word salad, it was getting very clear on what the day looks like and what the communication looks like too, and teaching people we can disagree. Let's just talk about it. And this is how we troubleshoot it. And yeah, we can get frustrated, but also we have all the resources to make it work.
I like that a lot. That's a good, I like the idea of like, what are the specific behaviors that specific actions that I would want to all of our staff to engage in to help build this positive culture. I've been thinking a lot about a culture of accountability and creating a culture where the staff can hold each other accountable, not in a tattletale way, but just like, hey, I noticed you're not taking blood pressure correctly. Can I help you do that? And making it a culture where that's feedback that's really valued, that, oh,
Mm.
you notice something I'm doing that is maybe wrong or I could be doing better. And I really value that you gave me that feedback and are holding me accountable to the norms that are in place. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about is, I guess, a specific behavior is just the empowering my staff to hold themselves accountable and hold each other accountable. And I think part of that comes from me publicly holding people accountable. I don't need to pull you in my office and say, why didn't you get all your blood pressures done correctly? But just say in front of everybody, not in a demeaning way or anything, just like, hey, I've noticed we've had some issues with this. We're all going to work together to make it better. It's something that I think staff have to see their leader holding people accountable to the norms or the expectations. And so then they can hold each other accountable. Like I've been thinking a lot about.
Do you mind if I ask you a follow-up coaching question?
Yeah.
What do you
Or
think?
no, I don't mind.
I'll stop. What do you think stops people from holding others accountable?
Ooh, I think one, it's fear that they're going to be seen. I guess if I'm thinking of myself, if I'm just working bedside with somebody and I'm like, they're not documenting their I's and O's, I would be held back by fear. They're going to think I'm nosy or they're going to think that I'm want to get them in trouble or something like that. And so I think that would hold me back. I think also I could see people saying, well, that's not my job to make sure that somebody else is doing their job. I just
Mm.
come to work and I get my stuff done and I don't need to be involved in what other people are doing, would be my guess. Those are my thoughts.
So I'm hearing those are two potential, and then using your words, points of friction that people might face, that
Mm-hmm.
fear and that lack of accountability. What are potential solutions to reduce the friction around the not shared accountability and then also the fear? And how can you do that as a leader?
I mean, I think going back to what you were saying about like having that shared goal. So if our shared goal is the best patient care we can provide,
Mm.
then and that is really accepted, that's our norm. Like this is our North Star is patient care. Then in theory, that fear shouldn't be a barrier because our culture is that our guiding light is patient care and providing the best patient care we can. And so me saying to somebody else, my coworker, hey, I notice you're not doing whatever. I'm approaching that. I'm approaching you because I want to get us all to the place
Mm.
of providing the best possible patient care. So I think really just like, as a leader, just really empowering people, like this is like, I think you said our compass is that north, our true north is the best possible patient care, leading people to this is what's so important to us. And so, there shouldn't be that friction because we all care about the same goal. We have the same goal and really making sure that everyone on the staff has that same goal and how can we get everybody to have that same goal, I guess is another question. And then I think just recognizing people, so to take away some of that fear factor or that just like, that's not my job, recognizing people when they do hold each other accountable. Like, hey, I noticed Sarah and Becky held each other accountable about this and publicly recognizing they're really dedicated to patient care. And so they noticed an issue and they both came up with a solution. And letting your staff see you hold people accountable, I think would help bridge some of that fear.
It's so true where that common goal is so instrumental at the beginning of any not just a conflict situation, but any feedback conversation, because people, even working in the same environment, especially healthcare, we are united by the goal of patient care. And so one thing that I really encourage people to do in those feedback conversation or conflict resolution conversations is stating it up front, but in a genuine way, where it's like, if I were to call myself, I'll use myself as an example. Hey, Adriana, I saw that you didn't chlor prep for the full 10 to 15 seconds on the skin. Bringing this up, not to pick on you, but only because I know we both really care a lot about this. Bringing in that positive intent, assuming positive intent, and then starting the conversation off like that. Be like, I'd like to make an objective observation. It's not a you thing. It's a task
Mm-hmm.
oriented thing. I love that you're intentionally building up this culture where you're like, we're all accountable. It's so true. If you have a voice, you have a responsibility, especially in healthcare. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about your journey and all your tidbits of wisdom. It's been so delightful getting to chat with you in this capacity.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's been great to chat with you. And hopefully it came out good.
It'll be great. Thank you so much for tuning into that episode of Sedate the Stress. I'm your host, Adrianna Muñoz. And I just want to give a special shout out to Megan, because she is just kicking butt out there, just taking such great care of patients. I've kept up with her work since we recorded this episode several months ago. And be sure to follow along with her work and send her all the good vibes. It is with a heavy heart that I announce this is the end of season 2, but don't worry, because season 3 is going live October 1st of 2026, and we have some guests that you will not want to miss. Executives, healthcare CEOs, people that are state and national leaders of healthcare organizations that you absolutely know as a nurse leader, or even as a physician. If you're looking for more resources, be sure to head over to ogdenpeak.com/ebook, where you can snag a copy of How to Manage People. And as always, if you're looking for additional coaching, consulting, or keynote presentations, I got you covered. Have a fantastic day. You deserve it.